Welcome, everyone. So nice to see you here. I am so excited to introduce our content mentor for today's Content Mentor Ed session. I'm sure many of you know Atima. She is just, what a soul. I have to tell you that Atima was one of the very first people I ever was introduced to at the Contentment Foundation through the rollout rep program and the flip grids. I will never forget, Atima's was the very first flip grid video I ever saw. And she was there sharing about her work. In case anyone doesn't know, Atima is the principal of Contentment Foundation's 4 Pillars of Wellbeing Mothership School in Singapore. And she brings her heart and her soul into everything she does. And that beautiful energy was just like oozing from a flip grid. It wasn't even live. It wasn't even a Zoom call. And I was just like, oh, I need to meet this amazing woman and connect more with her. And I'm so grateful that through this wonderful family, I've been able to connect with Atima. She's doing so many incredible things, not only for her school, but also, in case you don't know, she's posted amazing articles and blogs. She's really leading the way in many different fields in education. And I'm so excited that today she's going to talk about the pedagogy of listening, which right before the call, she said, maybe I shouldn't have done this. It's not a very, people are not really excited about listening. And I said, are you kidding? This is such an essential topic. We are often trained into how to communicate, how we speak verbally, even non-verbally, but we're very rarely discussed or even trained in how to listen. And we all know we have 2 ears, but only 1 mouth. So it's really important that we take this time today to really focus more on our listening skills. So without further ado, I'm so honored to welcome Atima here for our Content Mentor Ed session. And let's all give her a warm welcome. You want to clap physically or digitally, give her a warm welcome. And Atima, I pass the mic to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Rumi. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time out. It's so exciting to see you all. I think I really look forward to these sessions now because right when I joined the Contentment Foundation, we talked about meeting in Bali, and then that never happened. But then every time I see you all here virtually, I just feel so happy and I feel so excited. So thank you for taking the time out today and being here. I really feel honored and privileged. I am going to share about one of my favorite topics. The pedagogy of listening is the essential key to teaching. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that I'm not going to come here, and I'm not. Firstly, I'm not here as an expert. I'm here to share my inquiry with you. So I'm here as an inquirer, and the idea about today's journey is to share it with you from my perspective. And I'm still inquiring, so I haven't finished. But I wanted to pull you together, and I wanted to pull you into my journey and see where does it take us. So I hope you're ready for the ride. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the PowerPoint, actually. And Romy and I were discussing, and she said that the PowerPoint seems kind of eclectic, not very contentment or edish. But I wanted to honor the children because the pedagogy of listening comes from the municipality of Reggio Emilia in Italy. And for them, the child is at the heart and the center of every single thing. So when we talk about pedagogy of listening, for me, it was really important to bring that sense of play, that sense of childhood. And that is why you see these clouds and these beautiful images. So welcome again, and let's talk about the pedagogy of listening. So we're going to start by taking a moment, and we're going to talk about a sound meditation, both in literal and figurative senses, okay? So just take a moment to be where you are, settle in comfortably, close your eyes if you want to, and we'll just take a moment to do a little bit of sound meditation where we're going to think about and notice the sounds around us or the absence of it, okay? Ready? So close your eyes if you want, or keep your eyes open. And then take a deep breath. And let it out And with that, release every single thing, every single thought that you're carrying so far, and bring your presence to the room wherever you are at the moment. I want you to pay special attention to the sounds around you. What do you hear? What images do they bring up? How do you feel when you listen to that sound? Take a moment. So many layers of sounds. It's amazing what our minds think about when we listen to so many sounds. I'd like you to just say a thank you to sounds that's bringing your experience together. Finish thanking the sounds and your body that's bringing these sounds to your mind and connecting all your experiences through the power of listening. Take a deep breath, and whenever you're ready, open your eyes. Thank you. Beautiful. It's always interesting. When I started my mindfulness experience, I know I straight away went on to the breath, and it was quite later in my journey as a practitioner that I started looking at sounds and identifying sounds and seeing the value that sounds bring into my life experience, and it was fascinating. And as I talk about pedagogy of listening, I would like to bring that attention back into the world of sounds around us. So, my journey, I'd like to start my journey. I'd like to talk to you about the start of my journey with Ian's story. Ian is my student who I taught in grade one in Eton House, Singapore. And he's now doing his national service, and he loves the story even now. And he tells me very proudly that, yes, please go ahead and share my story with everyone because it started your story as a teacher. And I'd like to share that story with you. So Ian came into my classroom when he was in grade one, and he was a very charming, very enthusiastic child. Uh, Interestingly, he did not know how to write his name in Hindi, and I used to teach Hindi at that point. And if you see on top, that's his name written in Hindi script, in Devanagari script. And Ian came in and he said, "My name is Ian, and I cannot write my name." So that's how he started his journey with me. And I said, "Okay, Ian, let's try it. I'm going to write your name, and I'd like you to trace it." And he said, "Okay, let's do this." And he did that. He traced his name for about 10 days. And then he started copying his name. And one day I felt he was ready. And I said, "Ian, today you're going to write your name without looking." And he said, "What? You mean I can't see my name?" I said, "No, you can write it by yourself." And he said, "I cannot do this. I can never do this. It's impossible. No one can do this." And I said, "You can. You've tried it for 1 month, and now you need to try." So, we got into a little bit of an argument. And if you've been into a classroom, the teacher's ego can be very big, right? That, "No, I have taught you. I've taught you for a month. You definitely know how to write this." So I said, "No, today this is the paper, this is the pencil. I would like you to write your name." And he said, "Are you serious?" Without looking. And I said, "Yes." I said, "Okay." And he sits down and with a big sigh and with a big grudge and and all the drama possible. And I turned towards the rest of his classmates because I was giving them some other instruction. And very quickly, I hear a big, happy voice saying, I did it! I can do this! And I said, fascinating. Let me see. And he shows me his name, quite squiggly, but it was legible, all good. And I said, see, I told you so, right? It was a told you so moment. And he said, can I show it to you again? And I said, of course. So, when a child learns how to write his name, the child wants to definitely show it to you again and again. And I said, great, let's see. So he promptly puts his left hand on his eyes and tries to find his pencil through the other hand. And I said, what are you doing? And he says, you told me to write my name without looking, right? So he covered his eyes because in Hindi, the term for look and see are both the same. And that's when I realized that my instruction was not clear and his perception was not evident to me. And the poor child, all this while when he was arguing because he thought I wanted him to close his eyes and then try and write, whereas I had a very different instruction. And that's where my fascination grew with listening and listening as a teacher. Ian is now in national service, as I said, right? So he's way older, and he still laughs at it because he says that was the first time I felt that somebody had actually listened to me. Because later on I explained what I meant, and I apologized to him, and it was really, really interesting. So Ian and I had that beautiful relationship, and I could talk to him and I could apologize and we could take it forward. And then he started learning very quickly. So that power of listening had become evident to me, but I did not know what to do with it. Like, I knew I had to be a better listener as a teacher, but I did not know what to do with it. So as I grew as a teacher, I started looking at the pedagogy of listening. And it's interesting, right? Because in Reggio Emilia, we talk about, so Carolina Rinaldi, who's written some beautiful articles, and she talks about schools being a context of multiple listening. And to me, this was a strange thing, because what do we do in schools? What's our first? It's one of the most common things in teacher training. Teachers are taught behavior management and how to keep the class quiet, right? So when teachers are taught to keep the class quiet, how do you listen? And this statement that schools should be a context of multiple listening was in total contradiction to the trainings that we had received. And to me, this was fascinating. Like, what do you listen to? And how do you listen to children when you're not allowing them to talk? And what do you listen to? So if you're not going to let them talk, you're not going to be able to listen to them. This does not apply at all. And to me, this was a fascinating piece of inquiry. And so that is where I decided to dig deeper. And I was very lucky to be in the context that I am at the moment with Eton House, because Eton House is the Reggio Emilia arm for Asia and children, for children in Asia. So, this was something that was an inquiry as a school as well. So the organization was also very much into the Reggio Emilia philosophy and approach, and it gave me a lot of opportunities. And I think my aha moment came when I actually had the time and the opportunity to go there to Italy and actually see the Reggio Emilia schools. And it was a beautiful, beautiful, fascinating journey, which I think I was talking to Romy before this. And I told her, I said, it changed me as a person, not just as an educator, because their schools are actually context of multiple listening. So one of the questions that I had was, what am I listening to? What is it to actually listen to a child in a classroom where there are 25 other children? How do you listen to them? And that's when I came across the concept of what exactly is pedagogy of listening. So pedagogy is a method of teaching, and listening is a way of teaching by listening. So how could I teach by listening better? And listening is a very metaphorical word. So for Reggio Emilia educators, listening is metaphorical. And what you listen to is the 100 languages. You talk about the languages of children. So I'm going to read you one of my most favorite poems, and some of you may have read it before. But I know that for me, every time I read the 100 languages, it affects me in a very different manner. So take your pick. Either close your eyes and just listen to it, or if you feel like reading along with me, go ahead. The child is made of 100. The child has 100 languages, 100 hands, 100 thoughts, 100 ways of thinking, of playing, of speaking. 100. Always 100 ways of listening, of marveling, of loving, 100 joys for singing and understanding, 100 worlds to discover, 100 worlds to invent, 100 worlds to dream. The school and the culture separate the head from the body. They tell the child to think without hands, to do without head, to listen and not to speak, to understand without joy, to love and to marvel only at Easter and at Christmas. They tell the child to discover the world already there, and of the 100, they steal 99. They tell the child that work and play, reality and fantasy, science and imagination, sky and earth, reason and dream are things that do not belong together. And thus they tell the child that the 100 is not there. The child says, no way, the 100 is there. And this is a poem by Loris Malaguzzi and the founder of the Reggio Emilia approach. And every time that I read this poem, it touches me. It speaks to me. And I'm going to just go back and leave the poem here for you to just take a moment to read it. And I'd love to either hear from you, so feel free to unmute yourselves or put in the chat box, what are your thoughts about this? The 100 languages is the number 100 is definitely metaphorical here. But children are so expressive. They express themselves in so many different ways. I would love to hear what you're thinking here. So take a moment to either record in the chat or unmute yourself and talk.
Atima, the poem reminds me a lot about the concept of beginner's mind and how the absolute level of mastery is to be able to see what's in front of you like a child.
I'll hop in. Hi, Atima. Thanks so much for sharing this poem. It's beautiful. And for me, it sparks a reminder of when I was a teacher and the emphasis on content delivery opposed to listening. And it was just a really wonderful reminder that those voices are listening and for us to listen to them as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Atima. Thank you. It's Jennifer. This poem gave me goosebumps, actually. And as a teacher, it reminded me of the power of letting kids have a voice and choice in our classroom, that they really can guide so much of our learning if we let them, that we can structure things and help them, to go in certain directions, but that, they come with so much wonder and awe, and just creating more space for them to be able to exercise that.
Thank you. And I think, as I said, every time you read the poem, there's a layer after layer that keeps getting uncovered. And when we talk about 100 languages, we know that in Reggio Emilia, it's really fascinating to see how even what we call the resources or what we call the media, they talked about as languages. So it could be a language of paper, language of clay, language of metal, language of wool, language of thread, of yarn. And there's so many different languages. But in addition, there's language of music, there's language of play, and there's so many different ways in which children express themselves. But are we listening? And I think it brings me back to the point about, the school and the culture separate the head from the body, because we just listen to what we want to listen to. And we kind of keep getting back the focus on all the theories being constructed by us, and everything being given by us. The learning outcomes are determined by us. So when we talk about constructivism, it does not happen, because constructivism means that you're acknowledging, you're honoring, you're welcoming the theories that the children are building. And that is something that we are not doing when we teach by talking. So to me, this was really a very, very powerful reminder. And every time I see this poem, it's a very powerful reminder that we have to honor the children's voices, and we have to make that time to listen. And this is something that, as I said, as a teacher, as an educator, and even as an adult, going into any kind of a relationship, whether it's with another teacher, it's with another professional, with my seniors, with my colleagues, in my family, I think this poem actually has a lot of resonance there itself. I want to talk about Yusuf. This is my favorite story, and this is when I was dabbling with the pedagogy of listening, and this is something that happened, and I want to talk to you about Yusuf. And Yusuf is a student currently in my school. He's now 7, but the story happened when he was 4.5, and I'd love to share Yusuf's story with you, and this is with permission. So Yusuf was 4.5, and he connected with me very well, simply because he actually he's a very chatty child. He's a very, very sociable child. He loves talking to adults in particular. And one day at dismissal time, he came and he showed me this seed pod, and he said, "Mr. Atima, this is a seed pod. It has a seed inside, so a new tree can grow." And I said, "Oh, Yusuf, where did you find it?" And he pointed a tree to me, and he said, "Oh, this one." And I said, "How do you know it was that tree?" And he very patiently looked at me and he said, "Oh, it's from that tree, because that's where it was. It fell down. So obviously it was there." It should have been logical to me as well, right? But it was more logical to Yusuf. And I love that seed pod. So those of you who know me a little bit more will know that I love to play with seed pods as well. So I was actually looking at that seed pod very interestingly, and I think Yusuf looked at me very thoughtfully, and he would have figured it out that, I want to play with it or whatever. And he actually broke that seed pod, and he said, "Here, you can have it. I'll give you." So his seed pod had 3 parts only. And he said, "I'll give you 2 parts, so you never forget me. And I will take 1 part, so I never forget you. And I will see you on Monday." And saying that, he left me with the seed pod and he left. I just loved it, because for me, as a principal, you don't generally get to build very deep connections with all the children. But just the fact that he came back at dismissal to give me the seed pod, and he broke it, and he doesn't want to forget me, and he doesn't want me to forget him over the weekend, it was a big deal for me. And he said, "Keep it on your table, so each time you see the seed pod, you remember me." And I said, "Okay." And it sat on my office table while I was working for the rest of the evening. And every time I saw it, it brought a smile to my face, right? Just like Yusuf had intended it. Just as I was going home, I said, there's something else which kept tugging me and which kept pulling me. And I said, okay, let me take a photograph of it and think about it at home, because as usual, there's never enough time, right? So I took that seed pod, I clicked the photograph, I went home, and it was a long weekend, and I looked at it and I said, what was drawing me to that seed pod again and again, other than the fact that, that this child had actually created time to come and talk to me and share me and give me the seed pod. And unintentionally, the seed pod became a piece of documentation, which I used for inquiring into the pedagogy of listening. So as I went through it, I want you to just listen to it as an assessment of Yusuf. And here is what I heard. So Yusuf picked up the seed pod on his way to dismissal, right? So from the dismissal area. So it tells me that Yusuf is a curious child. He's observant and he wonders about his environment. He knows that the seed pod comes from a tree. He even tries to identify the tree for me because of the proximity. So just the theories that he's building, seeing the proximity of the seed pod to the tree. And he associates the position where he found the pod. And he talked about the trees that grow around it, right? So he's starting to develop the concepts of cause and effect. and relationships within the environment. I found Yusuf trying to use scientific methods to explore and engage because he wanted to know what was inside the seed pod. So he actually pulled it apart. That is the scientific nature of children. They actually are very scientific in their explorations. And he pulled the pieces apart to see what was inside it. He talked about the seed pod having little trees inside. And he talked about it can grow more trees. So he knows that this is a beginning of a life cycle. As he splits open the seed pod, he identifies there are equal parts, right? So he says, I'm giving you 2 and I'm keeping 1, right? He's starting to build that basic, simple understanding of fractions, of parts. He can also count the number of parts in the seed pod, and he decides how many he'll take back. That's the basic beginning of subtraction. He can articulate how many pieces he's giving me, and the purpose of giving them to me, don't forget me, right? So he has a purpose. There's an intentionality behind there. And Yusuf is a communicator. So not only that, his oral skills are strong because he is telling me not to forget him and using that as a reminder. His sentences have they're compound sentences, and he uses conjunctions. And his developing grammar skills are evident from what he's speaking. He knows the days of the week, and he's got a sense of time because he knows that it's the weekend and he knows that he'll see me back on Monday. So you realize he's actually building that concept of time at 4.5. He's building the values of relationship. It's important for him to walk up to me, share his understanding, give me some part, keep a part, and he also wants to let me know why he's taking that piece away. So he has a sense of purpose. And again, that intentionality behind his actions and how he's building those relationships. He's able to engage in reciprocal relationships and with confidence, right? I'm not his teacher, but even as a principal, he's decided to come to me and he's decided to pass it on to me. He's emotionally secure, and he does not need an adult to plan his engagements because he's picked up a seed pod. He doesn't need an extra toy. That's his toy, right? His social emotional well-being is evident. And there was so much more within this one seed pod that I could get about Yusuf. And for me, that deep listening was the pedagogy of listening. And it had started there. So when I looked at just a seed pod and just that little interaction, which was at the most 3 minutes, I realized that I learned a lot about Yusuf in those 3 minutes. Interestingly, just that week, his mother and the teacher were very concerned that Yusuf is not reading at that point. And for me, that was not the be-all, end-all of Yusuf's assessment. It should not have been. And this was a very, very gratifying moment because I knew instinctively, but I had not been able to give any documentation or any evidence that Yusuf was actually developing his concepts and developing as a learner. So for me, this was such a powerful moment that I actually wrote my blog about it, and I sent it to his mother and to his teacher. And that's when the report changed. The report card changed. And it was fascinating because the mother came back and said, I had never seen Yusuf in that light. And I don't know how many Yusufs we have lost. I have lost because I don't have the time to listen or I don't have the time to reflect. But at the same time, I know that this was a powerful piece that I had managed to develop and I had managed to engage in just to get a sense of where I am and who I am as a teacher. It also gave me a sense of what would my next step be in terms of provocation for Yusuf because he's got so much. So how do we use the pedagogy of listening to take him forward from there? I'm going to stop and pause at this point because that's a lot of information. Romy, if you can just break us up into a few groups. And what I would love for us to do is just take a moment to think about it and just discuss with each other. Take about 2 minutes each and think about what does this experience bring out in you? How do you see this experience having unfolded? And what thoughts are coming into your mind at this point in time about listening and this piece of documentation? Ravi, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll put you into small groups of 3 people each. You'll have about 2 minutes per person. If you're watching this recording at home, please take a little moment to maybe self-reflect for yourself and write down so you can also join the experience with us. We'll see you back here very soon.
All right, welcome back. Would anyone like to share anything that they discussed or what came out of it?
I'll go first.
Cool.
We all kind of coincided in what we were saying. We were all on the same page. Number one, blown away by everything you're teaching us and how many layers there are to listening, not just to words or gestures, but everything in between the lines. So all of us were fascinated by that. And from that fascination stemmed the question of whether this is something, a discipline that you develop with time, or would we, because we also agreed to do this together, enroll in the program of listening or the pedagogy of listening.
Thank you. And you know what, it's fascinating. Thank you, Veronica, for sharing that, because to me this has been a journey. Like it's and you're right, you know, it's layers after layers after layers, and this is just like it's cultivation of practice. And I think every time you try and cultivate that practice, it kind of builds your listening muscle, if I may say. And for me, I think that is important because in the beginning, you don't know what to listen to, and even identifying that. And there is so much noise, and within that noise, you know, you want to try and bring down to things that you want to develop together in a relationship with your students or whether with your colleagues. And I think to me that was the tricky part. How do you declutter the noise, and how do you identify what is worth knowing, and what is the body of knowledge that you work together on? And again, that sense of constructivism came from there, right? How do you build it together? Because it has to be both the sides that want to be interested in building that body of knowledge and the theories together. So it is definitely a cultivation of practice. And yes, thank you for sharing that as well. Thank you.
I'll hop in. I was also with Vito and Jen. We had a really wonderful conversation. And something that stood out to me was just the element of mindfulness that you were able to have in your interaction with that student. What's his name? Yosef?
Yosef, yeah.
Yosef. With Yosef. And should you have been on autopilot on your own agenda of, you know, whether it's a teacher and hitting specific learning outcomes or objectives, or a principal of a school needing to get to dismissal and move through the motions, you are able to mindfully have this interaction, which had amazing outcomes, which wouldn't have been possible without that first element of mindful awareness. So that was a huge learning and takeaway for me. Thanks, Atima.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. Yeah, I do. You know what? I do feel incredibly grateful at working with students and being able to have these vignettes of absolute aha moments and kind of getting blown away by what they bring to our learning. So yeah, I think I'm very grateful as well. So, but yeah, thank you for that insight. I never thought of it that way. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead for now because in the interests of time, I was telling Romy that initially I felt 1 hour was going to be too long, and now I feel 1 hour is going to be too short, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead with, you know, the other insights that we looked at and what Yusuf brought to the table. So for me, one of the questions all the time is, how do we listen deeper to, you know, to the 100 languages, 1,000 languages, the codes, the symbols that children use to express themselves, and then they communicate with it, and what happens? And as you know, again, this is a quote from Carla Rinaldi that you know, life expresses itself and communicates to those who know how to listen. And one thing that I tried and did was I tried and used the same pedagogy of listening to to the slightly older learners. So while Reggio Emilia is primarily focused on preschool, and they do have a primary school section as well. But the idea was then, okay, how do we build it further to take to the middle schoolers or to the high schoolers, or even to the adult relationships that we have at school? And that is something that I've been trying for the last couple of years, and interestingly, with a lot of success as well. And the more I learn to listen, the more I learn to develop those relationships. Something that comes straight to my mind was a parent, who came in extremely upset and very angry at the child's class teacher and said, I need to change my child's class right now because this teacher is not helping my child, or whatever, was very upset. And the parent was so agitated, and I said, how are you? And she said, it doesn't matter, don't bother, just change my child's class. And we kept on going through, so it was kind of a dance to and fro for a while. And I asked again one more time, how are you feeling? Because you've recently moved to Singapore. And she broke down eventually, and she said, I miss my mommy, I miss my country, I miss the food, the language. And now I have a child who I have to take care of, and I've just been through 14 days of quarantine. And it was so cathartic for her to be able to just speak it out, and just share her experience. And at the end of it, there was nothing else that she had bottled up, and she was happy, and she did not even want her child's class moved. And it just brought, again, because I've been focusing on pedagogy of listening, and I've been focusing on all the experiences where I'm using listening very actively to try and resolve situations, or try and bring more energy to the system. And the more I do it, I realize that listening is so powerful. And if you just go beyond that first layer of expression, of communication, of words, of body language, and try and dig in deeper, there's a lot other things that open up, sometimes not positively, perhaps for a while, because it can bring out trauma as well. But I would say that I've had a lot of success with this, with the listening. And again, this is something that is a practice, right? So it is not something that will come immediately. I'm just going to give you a quick 5 minutes individual task. And I'm going to ask you to, if you were to listen to your, okay, and it's ... So you fill in the blank. You decide what you want to listen to. It could be a part of your body. It could be something around you. It could be a chair. It could be your feet. It could be your computer. If you were to listen to your computer, what would the computer be saying? Or if you were to listen to your feet, what would your feet be saying? And this is an exercise I have used previously with some of my mentees. And this is one of the ways to start developing that listening muscle. And this is one of the ways in which you can start seeing layers after layers. So I'm going to just give you 2 minutes, not more. Walk around your house if you want to, or remain seated in your seat and just look around you and pick up any one thing. If you were to listen to your, fill in the blank, and just listen. And we're going to just give a 2 minutes time frame for this. So Rami, if you can put some music and you guys listen to whatever you want. And then let's get back after 2 minutes. Okay, take that 2 minutes. You can walk around, you can remain in your seats.
I'm not going to put music just so that they can really hear what they're listening to. Is that okay, Atima? I don't want to distract the listener.
Perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead and listen. 2 minutes. Okay. If you're ready, just head back. And have to think about how that experience was. It's fascinating when you start listening to the environment around you. As part of one of the history courses, not history courses, it was more like a religious, not religious, architectural courses for fun that I was doing, and the instructor talked about the buildings having layers and layers of history and culture behind them. And if you go around and if you actually listen to the architecture, or you listen to the plants, or you listen to the nature. It's fascinating what you can discover. Um, I would definitely encourage everyone, each one of you, to actually go out sometimes whenever you do have that time and actually engage in that deeper listening. And it'll be fascinating what layers come up for you as well. Just if anyone would like to just unmute and just quickly share the experience, or what did you feel, or how did you feel when you were talking, when you were thinking about, or you were listening to something around you. How was it? How did it feel?
I can share, Atima. For me, it was really interesting because sounds. There was two aha moments. One was I don't take enough time to listen to silence. Like I'm often listening to music or listening to someone or listening to something, but I often don't just take enough time to just listen to silence and really like embrace it. And so that's something I want to do more of. But also, it was a beautiful moment to hear like sounds that are going on in my house, like the running water, like the birds are kind of outside chirping, like sounds that I hear all the time. I now have a new connection even to my home. I feel more connected just because I've been taking more time to appreciate those sounds that make it a home.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And it's fascinating, right? When you actually start building those deeper connections and those deeper relationships with listening. So I'm just going to quickly move forward because I know, we're kind of running out of time. But I found this one really powerful. And again, this is by Kalina Rinaldi from Reggio Emilia. And she talks about the relationship between peace and prejudice concerns the ability or disability for to be good listeners. And this is where the education for peace begins. So, often when we go, even simply for resolving a conflict, we go with an agenda, we go with something that we want to say. But I would encourage that we go with the intention of listening. And finally, as a true blue inquirer, I would not like to leave without questions and more questions. So, what are the implications of pedagogy of listening for us as rollout representatives of the Contentment Foundation, or curriculum developers, or educators, as leaders? More importantly, within our social connections, who are we as social beings and as human beings as well? Don't have all the answers, but I'm going to leave you with more questions and perhaps more wonderings as we go ahead and listen a bit more. So thank you, everyone. I think it's 1 hour, and thank you for spending that time listening to me and also sharing. And if you have any more questions, I'm in the groups, or feel free to email me, or feel free to email Romy, and she can connect, and we can definitely discover more things. So thank you very much. Thank
you so much, Atima. Thank you for everything. Before we let you leave, of course you're allowed to leave, but we want to ask you, this is such a beautiful question that you posed here, Atima. What are the implications? So I want to ask you all, if every person can put in the chat, what is an implication from this session of what you're going to take away, whether your role as a rollout representative or an educator, a leader, or just a human being? We all can benefit so much from this value of listening. So what might you do moving forward after this session? Put it in the chat and let us know anything you're taking away and might put into practice in your own work in terms of the pedagogy of listening. Ooh, very well said. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, Atima, truly seeding wisdom in us all. Beautiful. So please put those in the chat. And if you're at home, feel free to reflect on what you can do to, put this into practice. I just want to take a moment to thank you all so much for being here with us. I found this great quote. I hope you can see. Listening is being able to be changed by the other person, by Alan Alda. And I just want to say thank you to you, Atima, because being here today with you has definitely changed and awakened something inside of me. And I know inside of so many others, as they put here in the chat. There so many great things are coming in here in the chat. We'll share in a bit, but Just want to thank you so much, Atima. And if anyone is really interested, I wanted to just share, I've been a huge fan of Atima's blog. It's called The Joy of Learning and Teaching, or Joyful Learning and Teaching, but here it's called learningandteachingjoy.wordpress.com. You can check out her blog with all these amazing ideas. And so just want to thank you all again, and so much gratitude, so much love, and continue listening. And I see that there's a question. So if anyone wants to stay on with Atima, we can stay on for 5 more minutes. Otherwise, thank you. Have a wonderful day and keep going out in the world and listening to what's out there. We'll see you next month. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Atima. Thanks, Romy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Romy. Bye.